It's a pleasure to be here and to add to the celebration for the 20th anniversary for FCRR. Let me first start by thanking Elena and Ben for being here. They are colleagues and friends of mine, and I really appreciate it. I know you guys are really busy. Ben's doing his email right now, so you can tell how busy it is. But it's really great to have you guys. Thank you so much. I also want to recognize a friend of mine in back, Jakob Petzer. He hasn't been around much, but Stan and being cancer-free will be around much more. So let's kind of celebrating FCRR. That was probably one of the longest. There's two in back that may have a longer stay here, or three. But he's been here a long time, and it's so great to see him out with us. I teach this class for undergraduates in psychology. I guess we're all friends here. I've only taken one psychology class in my life, and now I'm a professor of psychology. So when I was asked to teach a class in psychology as part of my appointment, I sort of panicked. They're like, would you like to teach a class of 200 kids in child psychology or child development or child psychology? I was like, no. And so luckily, Sarah's got an offer next time. I'm like, Sarah, what should I do? Honors class is something you know. And I said, I don't know anything. She goes, you gotta know something. And I said, okay. So I proposed an honors class in snarkiness. In what? Snarkiness. Snarkiness. I got the syllabus from Chris. I think that class is called sarcasm. So I came up with a class called Dyslexia, the Science, the Media, the Individual. And that class has evolved over time to where, because of retirements and people not teaching, I have 115 psychology students in my class. I don't know how many of them are interested. Like every day I go and sit next to an undergrad who got there early. I'm like, I'm sorry. Why are you taking this class? And are you interested? Whatever. I get very different views. But I thought I would take a little bit. I'm sorry for my students. I have students who work undergrads here, and I'm sorry for you guys. But I want to talk a little bit about what the media is saying about dyslexia. And if you don't know, it's very confusing for me. Because I'm interested in science. But now, because my class, I do know what the media is saying, and the media is saying very, very interesting things. And I want you guys to know a little bit about them. And I want to kind of try to provide a heuristic to think about stuff, at least one that's helped me. So this is the title of my talk, The Distributional Fallacy of Dyslexia. Yeah. And some of you may not know that people are saying it's good to be dyslexic. In fact, there are people on the internet who say, I don't have reading and spelling skill problems, but I'm dyslexic, and this is how I have approached my life. I'm like, so you don't have the symptoms, but you're calling yourself dyslexic. So my students in class are very confused by this, and we work through most of the semester to try to get them to think about the definition of dyslexia, integrate what's being said, and also they're going to hear from individuals who are either dyslexic, work with dyslexic, have children who are dyslexic, and they're going to get a very different answer or message from what they get through the media. So this is what I'm going to try to do. So on March 31st, 2017, Sir Richard Branson announces his intent to open the world's first dyslexic-only sperm bank. There it is on the web. That's for real. Yeah, for real. He says, up until very recently, some sperm banks have rejected donors that had dyslexia. To me, this is absurd when you think that some of the most successful people in the world are dyslexic. Rather than being seen as a weakness, dyslexia should be seen as a strength. Now, it just so happens that March 31st is very close to April 1st, and so Richard Branson has a sense of humor. Okay? But you're going to see in a minute, he is advocating for a special gift of his life. So the media is filled with examples of what I'm going to call cherry picking of famous dyslexics, trying to make inferences about the entire population of those with dyslexia. So how many of you guys are a fan of Malcolm Gladwell? I'm sure many of you are. So has anybody read David versus Goliath? Yeah, not many. It's a really good book. There's a particular chapter that's interesting about dyslexia. So what Malcolm Gladwell talks about in David and Gladwell, he asks a question. You wouldn't wish dyslexia on your child, or would you? And so he goes through and kind of chronicles a group of individuals who are very successful dyslexics and talks about it from the standpoint of a desirable difficulty. That through their struggles with dyslexia, they rise above, this disorder, and that we should expect others who have dyslexia to do the same. And in my class, I try to get people to understand, and that would be the perfect person to talk about this as a graduate school, that for most dyslexic kids and their teachers and their parents, it's a grind every day. There's nothing desirable about it. Yes, certainly some individuals with dyslexia become famous, many don't. He also kind of talks about how there's a cherry picks of statistics. I know this is going to be shocking for those who read this stuff, but he talks about, there's so many dyslexics who are entrepreneurs. And the sampling for this is really suspect, and I'm not sure we should trust it. Okay? But Malcolm's not the only one in our first-name basis. Even the IDA, which should be the scientific warehouse of information, Elena's on their board, should be accurate in terms of how they talk about dyslexia. And they came out with one of their newsletters talking about, is it possible that dyslexia is a gift? And what you see here, if you look at this, first we get the famous people, the cherry-picked people. We talk about certain strengths, visual spatial talents, big picture thinking, entrepreneurial skills, seeing connections. We also have this embedded within a brain. And then we have, of course, I won a Nobel Prize, and I'm dyslexic. So this is all saying, now I have a cons page as well. The problem is, it doesn't have any famous people, doesn't have a present, doesn't have a kid doing the superpower. So your eye is really drawn to, is it a gift? And we have all sorts of examples of people who are said to be dyslexic, who are famous. Some of which it's very difficult to tell because we don't have their original writings and things like that. Of course, if you go in most resource rooms in schools, there'll be a picture of Albert Einstein, said to be dyslexic. Actually, there's a very good academic paper looking at the history of Albert Einstein and refutes all of that, but it's still, it's the image that people want to portray. If Albert Einstein can be famous, you can too. So the question is, is this dyslexia a gift, quote, neuro myth? In my class, my favorite example is Tom Cruise. You know how Tom Cruise cured himself with dyslexia? He read L. Ron Hubbard's book. That's what he said. Neuromyths are misconceptions about brain research and its application to education and learning. Previous research has shown that these myths may be quite pervasive among educators, parents, even some people with backgrounds in the science method. So these are powerful things. The media is very strong, has a very strong influence on how we think about it. So if you do a Google search on dyslexia as a gift, you will get thousands of videos standing up and telling you it's a gift. These kids are going to have unbelievable outcomes with that. There's also the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity, run by the Shaywitz, Sally Shaywitz, one of the largest figures in the field, most important figures in the field. Heads the center. Steven Spielberg provides funding for the center. What does this tell you? Just the name, what does it tell you? You should have expectation that those with dyslexia should be exceedingly creative. We have books. These books are very influential with parents and with educators. So this is a quote from Sally's book talking about how dyslexics excel at problem solving, seeing the big picture, simplifying, all of these things that are associated with advanced skills that would lead to sort of being considered exceptional, not only for dyslexia, but in terms of creativity. Thank goodness Elena and Julian and Elliot have sort of a counter quote that, you know, sometimes the way this is being portrayed needs a misconception or maybe a neural myth for us. So I'm going to play a media clip, about 2 minutes long. I want you to just listen to it and see if you agree with what I'm saying.
If you're dyslexic, it's kind of your superpower. It's like the way that you think.
Our brains, they're wired to, I think, process information differently.
It's just the way that you see the world.
I don't think people do think the way I think.
The way I see the world might be different from somebody else, but that's valid. In fact, it's vital.
Dyslexics literally think differently. We have a different wiring of the brain, which means that we're really good at certain things, but we have real challenges at more traditional education and learning.
The dyslexic brain actually processes information differently. So while it manifests itself in reading, writing, and spelling, and that's where it's most obvious, it's really a difference in how information comes into the brain and is processed, which can create difficulties, certainly in an academic setting, but also amazing opportunities and abilities.
Their minds work in very diverse ways. They're able to see the world in a way that we are not.
So dyslexia is very common. We now know it's about 1 out of 5 students are dyslexic. So if you're a teacher, you've had a dyslexic student in your class.
The strengths they have are incredible. The way they can think around things. The ability to see the big picture.
They are problem solvers, they are outside the box thinkers.
Creative in the way that they can come up with solutions and ideas, but also in the way that they can invent new things.
They are curious learners who are eager to explore.
They have had to develop other alternative paths. So those elements of them often become then practiced, rehearsed, and better functioning.
They tend to be innovators, they tend to be entrepreneurs.
They're spirited, they're often really good with people.
A lot of dyslexic learners tend to be daydreamers, but while they're sitting there, they're not paying attention or being disrespectful. Oftentimes they're really coming up with innovative solutions.
So this video was put together by Microsoft in collaboration with Richard Branch and others. I want to be dyslexic, and that my life might be better based on this. So I want to remind you, though, that the definition of dyslexic or dyslexia, from a symptomatic standpoint, is difficulties in word reading, spelling, and dictation. Those are the best etiology right now is that there is a phonological basis to this. Nowhere in the definition is there anything about strengths or this idea to see the big picture, visualize things. Now, you could say, well, it's just because that definition is old. Certainly, there must be a science that promotes this type of thinking. And it just got left out. So I would say that could be, let's think about this a little more scientifically. How are we going to get our heads around it? What are we going to use to think about this in a logical way? And what I turn to always is to think about distribution. All of you, most of you, for first years are in Chris's class. I'm sure we started to talk about distributions. And so what we have, we do know that dyslexia is a heterogeneous, the sample is heterogeneous, maybe not in terms of reading skills, but with others. And others, so there are strengths and weaknesses within the population and within the individual. The question here for us is this idea about having a double exceptionality, having dyslexia, and also having this rare ability to see the big picture, be creative, to think outside the box. Is that defined by the individual or is it defined by the population? That's what we have to decide here. The arguments on the video are that it's associated with the population. Okay? So if we think we use the definition of dyslexia, then we're looking at the lower end of the distribution on reading and spelling skills. Then we can pick any skill, creativity, whatever you want to measure. I don't know how you measure seeing the big picture, thinking outside the box. Those are hard things for me to think about. I'm pretty sure we could come up with a measure of creative thinking. So let's just use that. But you could substitute anything else. If you believe the population argument, what we're saying is, or what they're saying, is that selecting a sample who has reading and spelling problems leads to the same group having creative skills. So this is that dual exceptionality, low on one, high on the other. If you think that this is more something at the individual level, when you select a group of children with poor reading and spelling skills, you'd expect creativity to vary along the normal distribution. And so the question is, what can we know about dyslexia? What do we know about these other things? Do they fit this profile, which means in the video, or more something else? And really, it's a question of comorbidity. Okay? And the key issue is whether we think about dyslexia and associated things from the level of the individual or the population. And I'm going to argue over time, or over this talk, that we ought to concentrate on. So if you believe the comorbidity between dyslexia and giftedness or creativity, whatever you want to call it, varies and it's individual based, then the co-occurrence will be very low in the population, basically a chance. But if you believe it's population based, then the current co-occurrence of dyslexia and high creativity or something in other ways, that should be well above change. And if you believe even more in population-based explanation, then you should be able to find a set of cognitive skills, affective processes, and neural circuits that distinguish the group from its double exceptionality. So there are lots of different models of comorbidity. Go and look at the literature. It's very complicated literature, but I'm going to focus on just three models: the chance model, the correlated liability model, and the causal model. So in the chance model, it's exactly that. You have two different skills, and the chance of them happening at the same time is just by chance. So there's no real relationship between these. So it assumes no correlation or very low correlation. If you select on reading and spelling, then you have probabilistic standpoint based on population of being high or low on creativity. Correlated liability model would assume that if you select on one, which is lower reading and spelling, that you have a higher than probability just because there's a relationship between those two. Okay? Now, I'm going to discount this model. So I want you to think about this. In order for this to actually happen, you have to have a negative correlation. You have to have a really high negative correlation. So I have been going to meetings and asking my colleagues, tell me one skill that's important to humans where it correlates with reading skill at 0.8 or above in a negative direction, and nobody can come up with anything. Okay? It's so fundamental to how we function that there's really no correlation that fits this. So I'm going to discount this one. I just don't know. I've got nothing that allows me to put that. The last one is a causal model, which if you have this, it causes this. That's what the video is saying. If you're selected for dyslexia, being spelling problems, you have a very high probability of being created. Double it's up down. So these are the two that are competing. Okay? And remember, if we believe the chance model, then we're not looking for common underlying process because it's just by chance. If we believe in a causal model, then we have to then figure out what's the mechanism, neurobehavior that moves those. So there's a growing number of meta-analyses, maybe two now, that are showing there is no evidence across studies for this effect. And so this kind of leads me to this idea that I think that we should concentrate on when we start thinking about dyslexia and what the kid is like. Certainly, there are very, very influential people, very famous people, very skilled people who are dyslexic. No question about it. However, I don't believe, based on the data we have so far, that we can say the population as a whole is at high probability to also see the big picture, the thing outside the box. And I think the media is misleading us. And I think from a distributional standpoint, it's really easy to figure this out. And you know, if we wanted to, we could do a population study where we actually look at all these things. To me, that's not the problem right now. We have now a new set of arguments coming from an evolutionary biological standpoint, where what the argument is that there's a difference between dyslexics and developing individuals that were among us well before we had reading skills, well before we had an biology, and that it's just that somehow these skills are also associated with poor reading, but that these individuals are with us today because they had some strength that helped them from an evolutionary standpoint thrive. This is not a very easy hypothesis to come up with a falsifiable test. So we're stuck now with anthropologists telling us that, oh, dyslexia is a disorder, a specialized disorder in exploration, which is seen as a very favorable skill to have. And this was around before we had requirements. These are hard. I can argue the distribution of these and not convince people, but make them uncomfortable. This one's harder. And this is the challenge. These videos have people thinking that we need an explanation for this. Okay? When I don't believe there needs to be an explanation. So I hope by this talk you understand sort of how the media is changing the discussion about what dyslexia is, what the experience is for children who struggle with dyslexia, teachers who teach kids with dyslexia, and parents who parent kids with dyslexia. I'm not saying that some of these kids aren't going to be famous, aren't going to be, but I'm not saying I don't think it will be dyslexia will be fighting their dyslexia.